Related to giving people real work is honesty. This is a project that I led at the Tech Museum of Innovation, another pretty ambitious project. The Tech Museum is a science center focused on technology kind of things, and we did this crowdsourced exhibition on technology in art, film, and music, where we went out on the web and we invited people to virtually design prototypes for exhibits on art, film, and music, and then we picked the best of those to build in real life. So this is a very uplifting kind of image. Here is this guy, John Bouchard. He's an architect, had never worked with a museum before. He built this digital exhibit inside a virtual world called Second Life. It teaches you about the scales. You can see these circles represent the notes from C to C, and you can activate them to make chords. And it sort of works like a music box where it goes around and it plays whatever chords are activated on any strip. We thought this was a great idea. We built this physical one that he's at over here, and so you can sort of see there's a white light box that travels across these buttons, so you can make chords on the buttons and you can make music this way. And this is one of the labels in the real exhibit associated with him and this object. Again, like the Lodz Ghetto, this is a really nice story, and it was a great project. However, it was also a total mess. We had hugely changing priorities and requirements throughout the exhibition development process. The room we were given switched, the budget changed. We're all used to this in our own work. But when you're working with volunteer participants from around the world and you're going back to them each week and saying, hey, something's changed, we're no longer able to do 10 exhibits, now we can only do 7, that can be very disconcerting for participants. And so connected with giving people real work is respecting them enough to really be honest about what's going on and not trying to package a whole experience for them where you then are not able to honestly say, here's what's going to happen to your thing, or here's what can't happen anymore. And really what saved our butts with Tech Virtual was being honest, because if we had tried to message everything in a very sort of institutional way, people would have felt like we were disorganized, we were in an experimental phase, but people would have felt like they couldn't trust us. And the only way we were able to have their trust and be doing an experiment at the same time was to say, hey, we're partners in this, and we're going to be honest with you about what we're trying to do here. Okay, so the very last example I want to share is really more related to cleverness. As a designer, I'm very interested in ways that we can be clever with things and not clunky with them. And I'm also interested in how, instead of using all these ideas to throw out what we've traditionally done in museums, we can use them to accentuate the way people understand the core values of what museums and our institutions are about. And the example I'm going to use is not from a museum, but it's a library project, and it's not even really a library project. This project called Living Library is a festival project that now happens in libraries and museums around the world. Living Library is a library where the books are people who represent certain stereotypes. So for example, you'll go to a festival and there'll be somebody who is the librarian and they'll hand you a catalog and you'll flip through and the books will be things like homeless person, male nanny, transit cop, transsexual, paraplegic. And you can check out a book, which means you're going to sit down with somebody for 40 minutes and have a conversation. And the idea behind this was really about around working on issues of hatred and stereotyping. And so they're encouraging people to sit down with each other and to talk with people who represent things that they're uncomfortable with. I pulled this quote from a transit cop in Germany who was talking about his experience as a book, and he was saying some of the most frequently asked questions were, do you have to be a bastard to get a job like yours? And he talked a lot about how punk kids came up and were talking with him about how frustrated they were about getting, yelled at for not having a ticket and things like this. But the reason I bring this up is that they thought that using a library framework had value, and it does, because when people go into a library, they have a certain way of thinking about what happens there. You get a library card when you come to the Living Library. You interface with a librarian, you interface with a catalog, you check things out. All of these activities are familiar to us, and they all relate to the idea of going to a library, being in a space where you're encountering new ideas, where you're being respectful, and where you're willing to expand your brain a bit. And I think that what's exciting to me about this is thinking about all the wonderful values that museums, libraries, art centers, performing centers have that we can really accentuate in this way. You know, there have been great projects where people can be accessioned, and I'm very interested in, okay, what would a living museum be like? You know, could you have a guy who's a veteran from a war standing there with an accession number being an exhibit, and you would use that exhibit in the way you would use another exhibit? Or are there other analogs that we'd want to use about what it means to collect things, or what it means to display things, or what it means to label things that we could really play with to let people experience some very different kinds of things, like what's happening here in the Living Library? And so I guess I just want to end, and obviously we've been talking about this a lot over the last day, but by really encouraging you to think about what a participatory idea might be that works for you and for your institution and for your visitors, and how you might play with that. So thank you for listening. We have a couple of minutes if you guys have any questions or thoughts you want to share, and all these slides are up if you want to access them later. So thank you. And I guess, do you know how to turn up the lights over there? Do you see a light switch? Try hitting a button and see what happens. Hey, excellent. Awesome. Are there any questions?